Incoming transmission from an unknown source. It seems to be urgent. Patching them through. They're calling themselves the HoloNet Marauders.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the HoloNet Marauders podcast. I'm AJ, joined here by my Bombad Batch. That's my new catchphrase I've been using with you guys.
You said it like the other day, and I was like, "Ooh, I like that."
It blew you away. It's pretty good. Bombad Jedi, Bombad Batch. I'll mix it up every now and then.
Fair
but we are here today to discuss a book, a Star Wars book that's coming out soon. And maybe you're listening to this or watching this, it might already be out. And we're talking with two of the authors, two amazing people we've had on our show before. Our friends Adam Christopher and Kristin Baver. How you guys doing?
Hey,
welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, doing very well. Thank you. How are you all?
We are fantastic.
We're good.
Thank you both so much for joining us again.
I'm just so excited to be back here, but also to be back here with Adam.
Yay!
Yeah. So the moment
we
saw that you both were on the new Return of the Jedi, from a certain point of view, we're like, we gotta ask them back. So, and we were so excited that you were both down to actually chat together as well.
Yeah, definitely the perfect excuse.
Yeah, because I know you guys, and I wanted to get into this a little bit. Like, I know you guys have kind of formed a friendship, as many of the Star Wars authors do, and many of the Star Wars creators. And I just love that about Star Wars. Like, well, it's awesome we get to talk to you guys and actual creators, but we get to talk to different podcasters and cosplayers, and we, those communities, we meet each other. So it's cool to see you guys, the actual content creators of Star Wars, canon creators, I guess I could call you guys, get to have that community too. And it seems like the author community with Star Wars is really cool. But how did that kind of start for you guys? How you formed a little friendship?
Do you remember, Adam?
No, I don't.
I guess it just kind of happens, right?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things happened just through the course of my work with StarWars.com. I end up talking to so many different types of creators, but including authors, and then being part of the author community. The Star Wars authors are just some of the most welcoming, lovely people. So I'm sure we're kind of all, we were both in those circles, but then also just by proxy of alphabet, I always sit next to Adam when we're on a panel. And then we always get into trouble with Mike Seglain because we're always just kind of
oh my goodness,
giggling amongst ourselves and having little side conversations backstage and when it's not our turn on the panel.
Well, because I remember the first time we met in person, it was Star Wars Celebration Anaheim, and because everyone was masking, I was loitering by an escalator for some reason, and I saw you heading somewhere. So I kind of raced over and was introducing myself. And of course, the mask, you had no idea who I was. Because, at a big Star Wars convention, Kristin gets a lot of people coming up to her because, for obvious reasons. So she's
even with the mask, they see the hair. It's just, there's no hiding.
So I was like, no, it's okay, it's me. And it was fine.
It's like,
so we knew each other before then, clearly.
Yes. Well, and then also now I'm remembering Star Wars Celebration Anaheim is that was the best picture that you and I have ever taken separately or together, but we took it together. And now it's the standard I hold all other pictures of myself by.
It's crazy. That photo is so good.
It's so good. It has no right to be that good.
It's otherworldly.
I have to see this photo.
I know. I gotta look at. I
don't think I've seen it.
We'll have to dig it up later.
We'll post
I know.
It, yeah.
I know. During London, obviously, Jamie, Matt, and Jamie were all keeping up with the Twitter streams and all that because Twitter feeds. Because we weren't there, we couldn't be there, and I know I saw you guys with other authors out at dinner and stuff. I'm like, oh, I love this. I love seeing you guys all hang out, and it's really wholesome.
Well, because what you mentioned before was the authors kind of have this community because we've all been through it. Doing a Star Wars story, whether it's a short story or a book or a comic, you kind of get fed into this machine and you somehow make it out the other end. So we've kind of got this shared, I'm not going to say trauma because that's a completely wrong word. It's a shared experience. And because there's, I guess, relatively speaking, there's not many of us, I guess, you can add them all up. we kind of gravitate towards each other, which is nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice little community. Yeah, I've made
Yeah.
loads of friends.
There's so many people in that community too who are at different stages, but then there's like the Jedi Master Padawan kind of relationships start forming, because when you're doing your first book, it is terrifying and you're so excited, but you're also like so stressed out, because I think everyone to a person who is working on Star Wars today came up as a fan, not as I'm a creator and now I'll work on this thing. It's like everybody has emotional stakes in it from the beginning, and it's so nice then to have other people who have already walked that path who can say, this is normal. I felt that way too. You're gonna be fine. Don't read the reviews. So
No, and I love that. And what better way to talk about the author community in Star Wars than from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi. As you guys, that's the reason we're here today, to talk about that book and your stories. And I just love, for any of our listeners or viewers that haven't picked up any of these books, be sure to read these, because I'm such a huge fan of short stories, as Matt and Jamie know. I just love a quick read. I can put down a quick story and then I just move on. It's just it's a different way to read, and it's fun to do that. And in Star Wars form, it's awesome. And for these books, it's cool to have the little background characters in each movie have a little story. Other things are added in too, but the one that I always think of when I think of these books is the guy that walks between Han and Leia in Empire Strikes Back. That's like the classic, from a certain point of view, story, and that's been one of my favorites. I feel bad because I forget who actually wrote that one now. So I'll put a credit in the description later or something. But yeah, you guys, Adam, you've written for all three of these now, right? A New Hope,
Yeah.
Empire, and this one. I think you had a story on the Death Star in A New Hope. Was there one on Bespin in Empire?
Yeah, so this A New Hope is the conversation that Han has when he's like, "We're all fine here. How are you?" So it was the other side of that.
Right.
And then Empire Strikes Back was a stormtrooper who gets stuck in the air conditioning, sort of, and sees the fight between Vader and Luke at the end.
And I just love those things, because when you go back to rewatch the films, kind of with any of these Star Wars books that adds things, kind of like Shadow of the Sith that you wrote as well. Like you think of different things happening in the background of these things, and these books just add so much.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. I mean, even for my own story, like in Empire Strikes Back, when I watched the scene when Vader and Luke are having that confrontation in that control room before Vader blows out the window and Luke kind of flies out, it's like there's a stormtrooper hiding behind the console in the corner. Like you can't see her, but she's there. Like we know she's there because
that's such classic Star Wars. Just everyone has
exactly.
a story. Yeah,
exactly.
But my first question for both of you with these stories is kind of, what was the process for writing these stories? I guess it's kind of obvious why you each have the characters you have, and Kristin being a huge Sai stan, it seems, and Max Rebo stan as well. But I know Phil got that story. And Adam,
he called dibs before me.
Right. Adam with General Pride there, with Shadow of the Sith, he's involved in that. So you're kind of like Mr. Rise of Skywalker fill-in at this point, it seems, which is nice.
Cool.
But yeah, how did the process go for each of you with these stories? Like, did you really get to choose who you wrote? Did they assign it? And where'd you guys go from there? Kristin, if you want to go first.
Sure. Yeah, I actually sent in a list of a couple of characters, pre-existing in Return of the Jedi, who I would love to write for, not knowing who else was in the mix other than, Phil Shostak and I are very good friends, and I knew he was already signed up for Max Rebo, and the email said, you can't have Max Rebo, but,
Unbelievable.
Let us know who else you're interested in, and, we'll let you know if they're on the table. So I know I sent back a list, and Sai was one of my top 3 or 5 choices. But at that point, it's not in any particular order. I was just so excited to be invited to be part of this that, if they wanted to assign me literally anything, I would have been I would have written the Sarlacc's left tentacle. It's fine. I would have done any story they wanted me to do. So I sent in a list, but then, Sai was the one that I think I had the best, maybe kernel of an idea at that point of where I thought her story might go. Because the rest of them was just like, it's like a who's who of my favorite characters. I was like, Mon Mothma, yes, the Rancor, love it. It's, Sai Snoodles, I am a Sai Snoodles stan, but I became a much bigger Sai Snoodles fan through this process. And obviously I'm a huge Akbar person too. So it's just like a who's who of like, here are some of my favorite characters. Are any of them available for me to play with? Thank you.
I love that. Did you work with, I'm assuming you probably worked with Phil a bit. I know you guys are good friends as well. And him having a Max Rebo story, you having the Sai, like how did that kind of go?
Yeah, our stories don't really connect on the timeline, so we didn't have to coordinate that element of things. It was really more, we were kind of bouncing ideas off of each other, and since we're both new to this process as well, like this was for each of us, it was our first Star Wars short story and our first piece of published fiction. So we were kind of working through some of those growing pains together as well. But I think the big thing that came out of it was that we kind of gave each other veto power over the voice of the other person's character in their respective story then. So like I read his story and I was like, I don't know if Sai would say this exactly. I think she would say it this way, and so being able to give some of that feedback, because I had been living in Sai's headspace for a little bit at that point. And then same with Max, where I was like, does this feel like it matches the Max that you have in your story, that you have in mind? You know him better than I do at this point. So you tell me that if this feels right and if the language is right, and all of those kind of pieces to make sure that when you're reading them together, then it doesn't feel like, wow, Sai is a totally different character in these two different tales in the same book.
That's really cool. And it makes sense. And it kind of goes back to that whole writer community thing in Star Wars. Adam, how did your process work for Pride?
He was pretty much the only character I was going to write. See, I don't know about. See, I have Pride's life mapped out. Like for me, he exists in my head from birth to death. I mean, we see him die in the Rise of Skywalker. He gets blown out of the Star Destroyer. But for some reason, I think it's because I love Richard E. Grant so much, who plays him in Rise of Skywalker, and there's just something about the character that appeals. So I knew immediately for Return of the Jedi it was going to be Pride, because like Pride has a whole military career. He says that he served Palpatine in the old wars in Rise of Skywalker. Like he's been around and been doing stuff. So clearly he was going to be in Return of the Jedi. I mean, he's Pride. So maybe I had more freedom because I've done 2 previous volumes. They're like, just okay, you're in this book. I mean, I kind of like, I need to, I was lobbying for it a little bit, but they were like, yeah, okay, and then I just wrote the story, which is unusual probably and lucky, but because I've been through it before, they kind of could focus their attention more on new authors. Because the great thing about, from a certain point of view, is that this is a place where you find new authors and new voices, some of whom are writers in other fields and other genres, with their own careers. Some are completely brand new. So the way I see it with anything, it's like I can do my job by going away and writing a story or a book or whatever. Leave me to that, and you can focus your attention where it needs to go. Which is kind of like a polite way of telling them to like leave me alone. I know what I'm doing, in a kind of more, in a nicer way, I guess. Now that I think about it.
Well, and I think you've also earned that because you have, done the first 2 volumes of the series and all, Shadow of the Sith. Like, I feel like the body of evidence that says,
okay,
fine, he knows how to do this, is mounting.
Yeah.
I think it was definitely different too, because like in the first volume, I chose, they'd made a list. It's probably the same for all of them. They'd made a list of like key scenes and what they would like to see, and nobody had taken that conversation with Han and the others on the communicator. So I was like, well, that's really cool. And then Empire was different again because I came in super late because we were trying to work out kind of the Mandalorian novel at the same time. So I was like the last author that they found, and they wanted that scene where there's only two people. There's Luke and Vader having a fight. It's like there's nobody else, but also it's the most famous scene in kind of Star Wars. So that was kind of tricky. So it's been a different process for all of them. I guess Return of the Jedi was kind of the easiest because, like, I'm doing a Pride story, and there you go, there it is.
I love that. It's really cool because, like you said, Pride does belong in this, and we heard him talking to Palpatine. I served you in the old war, and he's always a character I wanted to see more of, whether that was on the screen,
especially after Shadow of the Sith. I like Shadow of the Sith Pride. I want to see more of him.
Hey, maybe we will.
Fingers crossed. Who knows?
On online the other day, I posted about pumpkin spice lattes or something, and Adam responded with, "Pride would love pumpkin spice lattes, but probably not for the reason you would think." That's a whole thing. That was a whole thing.
I think I know exactly why he would like pumpkin spice lattes.
Yeah.
So
well, there'd be some confusion going on. He'd be like,
oh yeah. He'd be very confused,
spice?
But he'd probably enjoy it at the same time. So who knows? But I guess we can get into each story here. We'll kind of bounce back and forth between yours, Kristin and Adam. And I guess we'll start with the size story a bit here. And Jamie and Matt, if you have, I know you have questions on the list. If you guys want to hop in here and
okay, kick it off with my fun question then. So what do you think would be Size Noodle's favorite venue in the galaxy to perform?
Oh, I think whatever the equivalent of like the most massive stadium or like a Royal Albert Hall scenario, but where she would be like the only person on the biggest stage, like Taylor Swift era's style, like here I am and everyone is here just for me. And now I'm like, Sai would want to single-handedly like, improve the economy of the entire galaxy with her tour, but end up on, in some venue where, normally you would need to have, a massive, orchestra or group of people, but she could just completely hold it down and hold everyone's attention just by herself.
Yes. Yes. Okay, perfect. Good. I totally got that with like her entire story. I was like it's known she's a diva, but like this story though, she is the diva, like actually.
Yeah, and that was that ties into my question of like, what was the inspiration for like this? I would never say washed up, but this kind of like aging starlet kind of story of somebody who's looking into the past instead of the future for a good portion of the story. Where did that kind of come from?
I think a lot of it came from, the first thing I did was look at what is known about her, which isn't actually that much. We have that one Clone Wars episode. She shows up in the background of another Clone Wars episode, super drunk, just like tumbling out of a cantina for a hot second. And then of course, her number in Return of the Jedi, but there isn't a huge amount beyond that to really pull from about who this character is, and that's quite a spread of years. So I think the first thing I was looking at was, why isn't she on the sail barge? Where is she? Would she have survived this? What's going on here? But then also really trying to kind of pinpoint, okay, from the known points of her timeline, where is she now? It's like this weird, like behind the music way of thinking.
I was just about to say, where is Size Noodles now?
The stars, where are they now? But just like looking at that timeline and thinking about how long she was with Jabba and how this is like the opposite of everything she would want, based on everything that I have poured into this character and what I see from, the existing stories about her. And then kind of just piecing it together from there of, okay, how's she feeling in this moment? What's she going to do? But then in terms of inspiration, it was a really short hop from kind of setting the scene of, okay, here's where she is versus what we know about her. And Norma Desmond.
God, there you go.
That was like the clearest, one-to-one for me from the
Yeah.
very beginning in terms of, inspiration, confidence, perhaps some might say overconfidence, in ability, skill, and standing, and kind of really getting into that headspace. But then, as I started writing it, the two other kind of big inspirations that came up were oddly Blanche Devereaux in The Golden Girls.
Okay.
And Miss Piggy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In fact, at one point late in the game, I wrote in a robe that I think I've seen Miss Piggy wear, because I was just like, no, she's giving me like those Miss Piggy in the dressing room, really just having a fit to like what is going on vibes right here, and I need to like complete this mental image.
That's perfect.
With the feathery frill.
Diva energy.
I can
there.
still see it.
Incarnate.
Oh my god.
I thought
that really is.
When you said Blanche, I thought you were going in another Blanche Dubois. I thought you were going in that direction.
Yeah.
No, I like that a lot. That's really funny.
Well, because I still don't entirely understand how she and Zero the Hutt work together as a relationship, but they did. We just know they did. Just don't question it too much. Don't think about it too hard.
I'm not sure they worked quite well, considering how it ended, but I get your point.
As L3 says,
it came out fine.
Yeah, that's true. She got what she wanted.
So it's a good transition into the inclusion of Zero the Hutt. You mentioned the Clone Wars earlier with Drunk Sai a bit there, and obviously mentioned Zero. What was the process like? And like, were you always like, I have to include Zero in this in some way, shape, or form?
I wasn't actually. The interesting thing that I found with writing fiction versus nonfiction is you outline things, and for me at least, you outline things you think you know where the story is going, and broad strokes, it went exactly the trajectory that I had kind of plotted out. But then there would be these kind of like sneaky bits that would come in just through the writing process, where it almost feels like the character sort of like takes off on their own, and you're just kind of like following them and trying to keep up. And that's really where the Zero came in from, where it was really more part of that process that once we get down to, and I don't want to spoil too much, but once we get down to that moment where she is kind of more reflecting on her past, and some of the people who are she keeps a list. She keeps a list of people. Once we got to that, I was like, oh, obviously Zero has to be here. We have to talk about Zero. And I was also quite adamant that even before I knew Zero the Hutt was going to make sort of an appearance, that she would 100% be the kind of person who would name her droid after her ex-lover who she murdered.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'll tell you, when I was reading the story and she kept saying Zero, and I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like that can't be a coincidence. And I was rooting the whole time. I'm going, oh my God, there has to be like a Zero mention somewhere. They have to talk about Zero. I was like over the moon when we got to that part. I was pumped.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah, Jamie, I know you had a question about
one of my favorite moments in the story was when she's just reflecting in her dressing room, and I love the little detail of she's using like an old like dish tray as like her mirror, and like it's just like polished, like so shiny. But I love how a Bomar Monk just like enters the room and she just gets so angry at it. So I think that like the thing that kills me the most about this, like, would you say that like it's common knowledge, like at least to everyone in Jabba's palace, like who the Bomar monks are? Because it's just so random that like she knows exactly who this guy is, or pretty much, does she know he's a Bomar monk, or does she just know he's this guy who keeps like walking in her dressing room?
I think probably not everyone at Jabba's palace is really aware of like the history of the palace and who this who these scuttling creatures are, who are basically just like brains in cybernetic spider jars. But I think Sai is a character who makes it her business to know everything. She wants to be super well informed so that she can play the game in the best way possible for the best outcome for herself. So, and she's also been there a number of years at this point. So I think she would really make it her business to know all of those details. But also, I cannot imagine this is the first time a Bomar monk has stumbled in thinking that her weird little closet of a home is actually where they keep the rags, because they're just scuttling around still tending to their monastery.
Yeah.
There's something so, I don't know, pure, transcendent about just like watching Cy Snoodles yell at like a brain in a jar, just like standing there in the door, like, I don't know what's going on. I'm a brain in a jar. Like, she's just getting really angry at this brain.
I
Yeah.
love that.
It's just like,
Yeah. Well, and then it took one of her skirts.
yeah, that's why it's even
Yeah,
weirder. It's like
It has to clean. It has to do its thing.
this guy.
I feel
This
like she
guy-
doesn't have that many though, you know, like I don't think she has that much space to keep a huge wardrobe. So this is probably like a huge infraction for her.
Okay, so we're gonna need a spin-off because this guy is actually secretly the biggest fan of her, and so he's like gonna like go back to like all the other Bomar monks, and they're gonna be look, I got the skirt, and oh my god, that's
The only worldly attachment that this Bomar monk kept with him when he was placed in the jar was his undying fandom for Cy Snoodles.
Yeah,
I like that a
it's
lot.
important.
See, this just adds a whole other layer to the story now, because now I want to believe that that is true for that Bomar monk, that it's not just
That's brilliant.
you know kind of mindlessly scuttling around. It's like, oh, I'm gonna
I
get.
I didn't mean for it to get this far.
It's now my headcanon for that.
He's
so.
standing there in the doorway and he's like, don't blame me. I'm just a brain in a jar. I don't know what's going on.
I'm just trying to clean.
Yeah.
So,
No.
without getting too much into the ending and spoiling anything too far, what do you think? You know, Jamie jokes about a spin-off type thing, but what do you think Cy's next move could be here?
Yeah. So I had a different ending that was a lot more definitive. And so I'm not going to answer your question because the reason I backed off of that was because I thought it was so much more satisfying to leave her in this moment where it could really go, you know, one of two directions and let the reader kind of, you know, bask in that, but also have their own headcanon about where they thought, you know, that next step would take her. You know, because we certainly know some of the political landscape on Tatooine, and you know, with Jabba's parcel in particular, into the future in the Book of Boba Fett. But there's still a lot of parts that aren't, you know, filled in, and so I thought, you know, in that way, it's kind of better, I think, to not have it be definitive. I know what I think happens for her. I know what I want to happen for her, but I'm not sure that is what happens for her. And arguably, there's even like a third or fourth or fifth option. We kind of lay out two different possible scenarios, and then she's, you know, kind of, you know, in that moment with them. But who knows? It's Tatooine.
Yeah,
Weird things happen there.
That's a good point.
that's for sure. Anything that happens on Tatooine stays on Tatooine sometimes. So
I have a big, important surprise question for the both of you. I want to know the definitive right now, right here. I want you to answer this. Lopty neck or Jedi Rocks?
Oh, I want Adam to answer first.
Adam seems very split on it.
This is dangerous territory. I think we're probably okay. I'm of the right age where like I watched Return of the Jedi when I was at the movies, and it was actually '84 in New Zealand. And Jedi Rocks to me is kind of not my version of Return of the Jedi.
Fair enough.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, I don't have an opinion really one way or the other. I do on Yub Nub, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
As opposed to Jedi Celebration.
Yeah.
Whatever it's called.
Yeah, you know, personally, I like both versions for different reasons. I kind of love your original Sai, the marionette with her amazing tusks, and you know the very small, you know, trio of Max Rebo band that was from the original with Lopty neck. But then I also, you know, do have a lot of appreciation for the, you know, I think it's a 12-piece band by the time we get to the Jedi Rocks version. But I will say, on behalf of Sai, I will answer Lopty neck because I know she's still mad about every single time Joe Yowza just like holds it in, is yelling over her when it's her turn to be singing.
There you go.
That makes total sense.
Well, because actually, I love and again I saw this on TV in the '80s. There's like a making of documentary of Return of the Jedi, and the way they did the puppet of Sai, like the guy is underneath the stage, and like it's all linked up with kind of rods and things, and like he's doing all the moves, and the actual physical puppet is full size, it's like doing everything. To me, that's kind of like the magic of movie making. So maybe that's why I kind of lean towards that version as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I remember, so in the original Battlefront 2 video game for PS2, there was a mode where you could just play as all the Jedi and Sith and fight each other in that mode, and they would play music, and one of the pieces of music they would play was Lop Nek. And I had no idea where it was from because I grew up watching the Jedi Rocks version. So I was like, what's this other song from? And of course, when I finally got my hands on like the pre-special edition, like VHS copies, I was like, oh my God, there it is. Like, so I actually, I don't know, I like Lop Nek better as a song, but obviously having grown up seeing Jedi Rocks, I miss, I was just screaming at the camera and spitting on it. It's just how it is.
You're so young. Oh my God.
Well, I suppose I was, I was born in 95, so 97 was the special editions. So I kind of came out of, I watched the original VHS special editions and then the DVDs and the Blu-rays. So it wasn't until like a long time after that I had to sit down with my parents and have the talk about watching the original Star Wars VHS.
Yeah, so like it's not that you're young; it's that I'm very old.
No,
that's how yeah.
No, I envy the people who got to see the original trilogy in theaters. We saw the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi in theaters back in May, and that blew my eyebrows to the moon. I'd never seen an original trilogy movie in theaters. I'd never seen one.
A piece of us, we were sitting in the theater, like hoping that it was the original version we were going to see, but we knew it wasn't going to be.
No.
I mean, but a piece of us was, holding out hope for that.
Yes. I will say real quick before we get away from the Jedi Rocks Lop Nek debate, part of my research for the Psy story was finding out that there are indeed Huttese translation lyrics to some, but not all, Star Wars songs that are sung in Huttese, and that is extremely fascinating and weird, and also, but not surprising at all to know that Story Group was like, yeah, we have a spreadsheet for that. Do you want to see it? When I asked, like, oh, is there a translation for what this means? And they were like, yeah, hang on, here you go, whole spreadsheet.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievable.
That is the best thing I've heard in weeks. Oh my God. Like I am obsessed with like in-universe Star Wars music, and like sorry to get derailed already, AJ, I'm so sorry. But like the Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order games have done so much for the fact there's like in-universe music like in the bar and like that like Cal listens to, and so like we go back to like the originals of like having like Sai and everybody like actually singing songs and like the original Cantina band, but it's just Huttese. Like you have all the lyrics. I'm just like, can you send that to me?
I was about to say, I'm
can't,
incredibly jealous now that you know the lyrics to Jedi Rocks.
Oh my God.
Jedi Rock and Lop Nek. It's unbelievable.
Anyway.
And there were a surprising number of entries on this spreadsheet for other, elements like, from like the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. There were a couple of Huttese songs there too.
Wow.
Yeah. And now I'm like second guessing, like, should I talk about this document? Is that a secret? No,
okay.
Fine. But I probably can't like share it.
No,
for the record, Kristin Baver did not send us the document. We have not seen anything. Nothing has been sent.
Anything about these pieces of music.
So
now I have a goal. I will say
that's the new goal.
One day, yeah, something to look forward to one day, maybe. So, I know I have one last question about Psy. So you compared her to Taylor Swift earlier, but I did have a question of what real life band do you think is closest to the Max Rebo band?
Oh, that is an interesting and very difficult question.
Yeah, it is tough.
Yeah. I get like a little bit of a like Fleetwood Mac vibe off of Sisal. That's probably a little self-serving because I love Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, I could see that.
But I did also bake in there's 3 Rolling Stones references because of her beautiful Mick Jagger lips.
Right.
And one of them was the poster that's hanging in her room is very specifically modeled off of the Rolling Stones live poster. which also has like an ape with those big, beautiful lips. And so I was like having the best time making these like little Rolling Stones connections for her and for the band. So maybe they're closest to the Rolling Stones. I don't know. It's hard to say.
All right. I don't
Like
know why my brain went to the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. I don't know why.
Interesting.
I don't know why I see them as like a ska band.
I mean, I prefer that to the in-universe term for some of the music that I'm not even going to say. I'm not going to say because it was the source of so many written arguments between Phil and I, where I was like, "Stop using that word. Stop it."
It's the official term. You can't stop using it. It's important.
Like,
it's important to the world building.
Something else.
This is why I like all the other versions of music in Star Wars.
Yeah.
The band used big Blues Brothers vibes to me. I mean, it's not like two people. That's like low-key my favorite movie, actually. But like they have like the huge band and the two main singers ish. So big vibes there. Plus, it's like jazz and blues, so a little bit.
So I've always thought that in the old days they were like early Velvet Underground, and then as they got more popular, their style changed and became more commercial.
Max
so then
Rebo
we hit
sold
into
out.
the kind of.
What you're telling me?
What's that?
Max Rebo sold out. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, but like.
You thought about that so long, Adam.
What's that?
You thought about that so long, like that.
Well, because then they transitioned to Fleetwood Mac era.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And then they've got every big band has phases.
It's true. How transcendent is the Max Rebo band that we all came out with just such radically different answers for like
that was wild. I'm glad everyone did have an answer.
We went to like all corners of music, just bouncing around.
That's what it is. Let's move on to the Pride story. Let's AJ, what do you have?
Rock stars, let's talk about General Pride.
Let's talk about Pride. So I don't know where we want to start with this one. I mean, there's a lot to dig into here with Pride and his trip on Endor he's going through. But it gets to a point where, Matt, I know you have a good question about Pride's personality.
Yeah,
we should probably get to, but
my burning question, the one I want to know just desperately, is how did you reach this characterization of Pride? How did you reach? I'll put it charitably, the rock star persona that is General Pride. Because I just really want to know how you got that from like looking at him in The Rise of Skywalker. I would not have expected this, but I absolutely love it. Like, it just caught me so off guard, and I love like digging into every time like you write a story or he appears on text. I'm like, oh god, what is he gonna get up to now? What's Pride gonna be doing?
Well, yeah, because I think in Rise of Skywalker, to me, it's very clear that at one point he was a mess, and he went through some kind of like personal transformation to become the Pride that we see in Rise of Skywalker. Because in the Rise of Skywalker, he's arrogant and pompous. Clearly doesn't like anybody, but doesn't care about any of that. And although he's arrogant and pompous and doesn't like anybody, he's very good at what he does because he's a Legion general and he has authority and power because not because he kind of failed upwards or was like found himself in charge, but because he's actually really good at what he does. But that seems to me to have come from a point where he went through some kind of crisis, some transformation, some kind of like personal epiphany. So earlier in his life, kind of going backwards, so Rise of Skywalker, and then we see him earlier in Shadow of the Sith, where he's obviously younger, and there's kind of hints of this kind of past that he might have had. And he's a bit more unrefined. Like the Rise of Skywalker version, he's not a nice person, but he's kind of got a composure and a refinement. He kind of clearly thinks very highly of himself, almost in a kind of aristocratic way, which is like, it's very old-fashioned. He's an old-fashioned Imperial.
Right.
And he clearly likes, Imperial with a capital I kind of life.
Oh yeah.
And personality. Yeah. So then going back, Shadow of the Sith is earlier, and then Return of the Jedi is obviously earlier again. where like this is the start of things going wrong, maybe. And there's a movie called Withnail and I, which is Richard E. Grant's first movie. And it's kind of amazing that, like, I think it did very well in America, because whenever I mentioned it at like Star Wars Celebration, especially in Anaheim, we had a panel. This was before Shadow came out, and I kind of was met with this kind of room full of blank faces. But Withnail and it's about two out-of-work actors in the 1960s: Richard E. Grant, who plays Withnail, and Paul McGann, who plays I. And they go on because they're unemployed and alcoholic and kind of dabbling in drugs and stuff. They go on holiday to the countryside to kind of get away from their terrible situation. And basically, it's a comedy, and it's a complete disaster. But so much of Pride is really Withnail from Withnail and I. Not because I'm trying to write Withnail and I fan fiction, because that would be wrong, but because he very clearly, that is the trajectory. Like in Withnail and I, they're unemployed, poor, down and out, drinking themselves to death. Like it's kind of like a black comedy. It's kind of they're not in a good situation, and I can absolutely see the point where the character of Withnail can go in two directions at the end. He can either kind of just collapse completely and disintegrate, or get his life back on track. That's kind of the whole point of the movie. They go off, and Withnail and I go off in different directions at the end. So it's like, okay, well, this is the trajectory of Pride. We see him in Rise of Skywalker, and it just fits. So the idea that he's kind of this, I don't know, slightly, at this point in Return of the Jedi, slightly paranoid. And he's got this thing of like I said, no one likes him in Rise of Skywalker, and he doesn't like anybody. This is well established in Return of the Jedi era. He doesn't like anybody on the ship that he's been assigned to. They don't like him. His commander doesn't like him. That's why he's been sent to Endor, but basically to get rid of him. So there's definitely a feeling of like everything is conspiring against him. He's got this grand plan of his life, and it's all going wrong. No matter what he does, it's kind of going wrong. But he's not the kind of person where that will cause him to collapse completely. It's like, I'm going to try and take charge of the situation and get himself back on track. So it's like, it just seems so logical. And like, yeah, if you watch Withnail and I, there's a lot of Pride. No, there's a lot of Withnail and Pride. And like, both the Return of the Jedi and Shadow of the Sith are full of jokes and jokes and Easter eggs.
All right, I'm gonna have to watch it.
So
for sure.
yeah, it's a brilliant movie. And like I'm saying, I'm not writing Withnail and I fan fiction, but it's funny because the British people who know Withnail and I, because it was big in kind of the UK and Commonwealth countries, like they call Pride Withnail in space, which is fine, because that's kind of what it is. But I say that without apology, because it all goes back fundamentally to Richard E. Grant, because Richard E. Grant is such a good actor, and he's in The Rise of Skywalker for, I don't know, really, if you add his scenes up, how long is he actually in it? He's not a main character. He's not even really a main villain. He's kind of like this guest star villain.
Yeah.
But he puts in such a performance, and everything that I do with Pride, whether it's based on Withnail or based on Pride or whatever, like I'm focused on the fact that this is Richard E. Grant, and like how would he approach the role, and what would he do? And I kind of try and do him justice, because it's not my character. I never created Pride. Pride was written for the movie, but then created effectively by Richard E. Grant and the director. So my job is to kind of do them justice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, because when we were all coming up with these questions and we were reading, about Pride and your stories, we're always like, where did he get this idea from? We love it, but it's
yeah.
And my random guess was like, oh, it's probably an inspiration from some Richard E. Grant role or something, kind of along the lines of what you said. So that makes sense.
Yeah, you guessed it.
I win the bet between the three of us that we didn't have going.
That we didn't have, but we kind of had. But okay.
I cannot wait to see Pride's either collapse or become the Allegiant General of the Final Order. moment. I can't wait.
I know, one day.
Well,
Gotta
this
see
is the
that.
amazing thing. It's like he's in Rise of Skywalker, but clearly he was doing something off camera. You know,
Yeah.
he's Allegiant General, which is, you know, it's second only to Hux and Snoke and Kylo Ren. So he was doing something. I initially thought that he was kind of busy on Exegol with the kind of Final Order fleet, but it's revealed in the novelization for the Rise of Skywalker that he was actually as surprised as everybody when Palpatine turns up. So he's kind of doing something, and I hinted that in Shadow when he's kind of assigned to the corporate sector, because the corporate sector and the First Order kind of got together. So it's a Star Wars thing. It's like the character that appears for 5 seconds. You have the action figure and suddenly the whole backstory and comics and things. It's like, this is the perfect kind of Star Wars character.
Excuse me. I don't eat a cough thing.
Jamie, did you have a
Yeah, I
question?
did. So like you mentioned like obviously like in like this story, like his grand plan isn't really going the way that he thought, or everything's not really going that way anyway. But like what would you say based on the events of this tale, like what does he think his like grand plan is now? Like what's his like 5-year plan like with the Empire at this point in time? Does he have one at this point?
Well, I guess he's one of those people he's probably super into productivity hacks, and like he'd listen to holotapes of inspirational speakers, and then when something doesn't go his way, he'll find another inspirational speaker from a different planet and listen to their holotapes. So it's kind of like he's got this big plan, but it's always being adjusted. And especially at this point in time, we know that there's the Battle of Endor, and then there's the Battle of Jakku coming up, which is kind of more the final battle of the Empire. So yeah, his 5-year plan will be adjusting on a weekly basis, I think.
Yeah, over the next year.
But again, he's convinced himself that like this is fine because like everything is against him. It's all going wrong. The universe is conspiring, but I'm gonna start again tomorrow. Make a list. Check
It's
it
like
off.
weirdly inspirational. I don't think it like should
Yeah.
be, but it is.
Hey, he's a Legion General by the time we see him kind of 30 years later. So he kind of got it together at some point.
Yeah, he didn't fail up, as you said, so he's good at what he does.
He made it
Efficiency
in the
hack
long run.
number 1: death sticks. I would say.
Yeah, but then he'll go through a phase of like, I must give up all vices and be pure, and get up early in the morning and do my mindfulness meditation, and then of course that won't work. So then we're back on the death sticks, and it'll be special
a
death
vicious
sticks from a
cycle.
certain planet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's kind of all about that.
So
one thing that struck me about both of our stories is that both of these characters are in a place where they're like, well, this isn't going how I thought my life was going to go. But also they're so confident. Like I would love to have like 50% of either Size or Pride's confidence in any moment in life.
Oh, absolutely.
seriously,
Oh, yeah.
with everything falling apart, but they're still like, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna make it eventually.
It'll be great.
But yeah, Adam. So with Pride wandering around Endor, he thinks about he overhears that Vader's funeral pyre was around, right? So
He doesn't believe it. I love like that. How like the one trooper is like, no, you got to see this, and he's like, fine, okay, sure.
And then his Vader's lightsaber is mentioned, and if Pride was able to find that, and I just have to think like, what would Pride be like with a lightsaber? Do you think if he had that?
It's like we know that he's seen Vader in action, like, and he knows what a lightsaber is. He knows the kind of power that Vader had. But I just kind of get the thing he'd like turn it on and be like, well, wave it around a little bit and be like, well, it makes a funny noise. It's a nice color. But and then just turn it back off and then be like, yeah, it's not my kind of thing.
Wow.
I think because he's very practical because he knows that he doesn't know how to use it.
That's true.
Which is why he's kind of more, not to spoil the story, but he's more interested in it as a symbol of power rather than like, this is a weapon I can kill my enemies. He's much more interested in that kind of, that's the thing with the Imperial with a capital I. It's like the symbols of power and the hierarchy, and he is superior to the common Imperial soldier. So therefore he's got the kind of he deserves, I deserve to be the Legion General. He's got that in the background. So yeah, the lightsaber, it's kind of interesting. It'd be like, you know how maybe it's kind of old fashioned, but like in the military they used to have like batons,
Yeah.
like kind of symbols of their office or
Mhm.
rank and things. So he'd be walking around with it all the time, waving it, never really turning it on.
I love that image of him just like tucking a lightsaber like under his armpit, just like walking around, just like
And
looking
maybe,
down
yeah.
his nose at everyone, like, oh, look what I got.
And then late at night in his quarters, you know, a stormtrooper walking past the door would hear the kind of and a few kind of, you know, a few kind of moves, and it'd be like a red glow under the door. So he's kind of like just having a look, you know, just seeing what it's like.
That's awesome.
Maybe.
What an image. That's great. I love that.
Back to
It's
the
like-
stormtroopers, like overseeing things.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
stormtroopers seeing things they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Whether it's hiding
Yeah.
behind a console and then on Cloud City, or turning the corner and seeing Kylo Ren smashing a console or something.
Yeah.
I love those kinds. I love that idea. But you mentioned earlier like a symbol, like a status symbol, or like a symbol of like power. And this was just kind of like off the top of my head. When I was reading the story, I was reminded a lot of like the old Legends, like children's novel, The Glove of Darth Vader. Do you know of that?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, did you take any inspiration from that? Like, because that was like immediately coming to mind. I was like, oh my god, like, what if he finds the glove of Darth Vader? You know, and then if it like,
Well, no, actually, because like I haven't read it,
hmm.
and I know that it has a certain reputation in some
Well.
circles. It's a bit of a peculiar book. I don't know. I haven't read it.
It's a ride and a half. That's what I'll say. That book is a ride and a half. But to explain to anybody who's listening who might not know about it, the plot is that like the Empire's vying for power after the Battle of Endor, after the Emperor's death, and somebody, I won't say who, but somebody appears with the glove of Darth Vader, like wearing the glove of Darth Vader, and that's like his claim to like, oh, I'm the next in line, kind of deal. And so everybody kind of like rallies around him, and then there's talking whales, and then there's a bunch of other stuff. But that's the
Talking whales.
But I mean, it's kind of an interesting point because in in the Rise, in the sequel trilogy, we see Vader's helmet. You know, because Kylo Ren has the helmet, and although obviously there's a family connection, it's like this is a symbol, a totem of the past. And we know in the Aftermath trilogy, there was kind of like a black market in Imperial and Sith relics, and kind of rumors about Vader's lightsaber, and people kind of were seeking it out. So Vader is a kind of icon of not only of Imperial power, but of kind of the strange, you know, we know it as a dark side, but not everyone in the galaxy knows about the Force or how the dark side works. It's like strange, mystical, magical powers. So he was kind of more than a man. So the idea that bits of him that are left over kind of have power, and you know, gloves, maybe helmets. How did the gloves survive the fire in that book?
It's a good question.
That is a good question.
I don't think they ever explain it. Maybe it was fake. I don't remember. I have to go back and read it. The last time I read it was like when I was like in elementary school.
Maybe it was fake.
So that's a glimpse into, you know, Adam's creation of Pride there, or you know, add on to Pride, I should say.
That
for this story and all that. So
it has definitely helped me.
Yeah, it's nice to get some clarity, I guess, on how that all came about. So I find that really interesting. I loved that. And you know, Kristin, obviously hearing about the Sice Noodles process as well. You know, both of your stories were, I haven't finished the whole early copy that we got. I haven't finished all of it. Obviously, I read your two stories and a handful of others, but they're all great. You know, your two were two of our favorites for sure. I'm not just saying that. Like, you know, both characters we love. So it was fun. But I did have a couple more general questions, not general Pride questions, but general questions for both of you. That was terrible. So of the other stories, do you have a favorite or two of the other authors of the two stories in this book? You know, obviously we mentioned Phil's Max Rebo story, and I know there's a Dexter Jetster story in there, which was nice to see.
Man, I can't wait to sink my teeth into that.
I am also a big fan of, I think it's called No Contingency, the next Mon Mothma story. So I think there have been 3 Mon Mothmas now, in one for each trilogy, or one for each in the trilogy rather. And I quite enjoyed that one. Both, just the characterization of that character, who, I was a big Mon Mothma fan before it was cool, before she was in Andor, before we knew that much about her. I remember back when she showed up on Rebels, and I was so excited about that speech, and I was like, yes, everybody is recognizing that Mon Mothma is amazing right now. And it's just, it's grown now exponentially.
Yeah, we're in the golden age of Mon Mothma now.
We are at the height of Mothma madness, whatever you want to call it.
The year of Mon.
Yes. But I'm really fond of that story, both because of the character, but also I think it's just a really fun characterization. And I won't spoil it too much, but of course, in Return of the Jedi, when we see Mon Mothma, she's talking about the many Bothans that died to bring us this information, and it's a really interesting exploration of where she was and what she was up to before she gets to Home One for that meeting.
Yeah, I actually haven't gotten to that one yet, so I'm excited to read that.
Yeah.
Any story about Mon is awesome.
No
I can't say I've always liked Mon Mothma, but since Genevieve O'Reilly in Andor, and now gonna be in Ahsoka, it's gonna be. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adam, what about you? Do you have a favorite story that in this book that isn't yours or Kristin's?
It's difficult because, like, I think
There's a lot. Yeah.
what I said before is, like, the whole thing of these anthologies is that it's, each one has had 40 authors, and there's just amazing stories. And the great thing about bringing new people in is that they can see Star Wars from a different point of view and come up with something that you could never really imagine as being kind of a Star Wars story. I love the Journal of the Wills.
Oh yeah.
Endings. I mean, they're kind of like a little treat at the end, really.
Yeah. They're good fun.
Yeah. Because it's me, Tom Engelberger, who wrote those, and Jason Fry are the 3 authors who've done all 3 books. So we're kind of a team, a trio. Mike Chen has a story called Brotherhood, which is kind of, it's like Anakin. Well, it's kind of like if General Pride is my thing, then I think Mike Chen has Anakin. There's Anakin and Obi-Wan maybe are his thing. That's really, really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's like
that's another thing I like about these books is, like, they'll bring like you or him in to like keep going with what stuff they've already built on.
Yeah.
But then it's also kind of a launching pad for other Star Wars authors to get into this stuff. So I know way back when I think in the A New Hope one, Claudia Gray did a Master and Apprentice thing,
right?
Qui-Gon, and that was kind of she wrote that book, Master and Apprentice, with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, one of my favorites. So good. But I don't know. These books are just so cool. I recommend anyone pick them up. They're just a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay, I got one last like broad one. If and obviously you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But it is if you could write any other from a certain point of view from one of the other trilogies, what would be your top one?
Ooh.
One of the other trilogies.
One of the other, the prequels or the sequels. In like 20 years, they're gonna do like the next.
If we eventually get to those,
batch of books.
We're ending it with the hard questions here.
It's a very hard question.
The deep thinkers.
I mean, what, the Phantom Menace will be 2039?
Yep.
Yeah. It's coming up.
Just around the corner. Yeah. I love
it's a great question. It's a hard question.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, I love the prequel trilogy. So as I said, because I'm super old, it's like when the special editions came out in '97, I think was like Star Wars special, A New Hope, and then going to see the Phantom Menace. That remains the movie that I've seen the most times at the movies. I think I saw it like 9 times, because I loved it and I still love it. So yeah, that's like if we did from a certain point of view, Phantom Menace, man. I'd be studying that film frame by frame to find someone. For sure.
Yeah. I think it would be funny for Phantom Menace to write a story of somebody who works in the Naboo Palace, and whether it's common knowledge that like they can tell the difference between Natalie Portman and Keira Knightley, or if they're all just confused all the time about the switcheroos. Like how well does that work? Because it works super well on Anakin, but for everybody who like sees them day to day, like do they know, or is that something that it's really effective? But I will say one of my favorite things about these books is the stories that really surprised me. Like the first one, the Dianoga story, I found was really surprising. I didn't really expect a story from the Dianoga's point of view. So I think for me, for prequels, I would actually go Ackley. I would like to write the story.
Oh God!
What's going through that creature's mind?
That's really good.
Oh my God! That's
That'd be great.
That'd be...
This is not an official pitch, but maybe whatever will that be? 2040.
2042.
2042. We'll come back to it.
We can come back to this interview and
yeah.
This
is the origin.
Yeah, the prequels would be a goldmine for all that stuff, especially Phantom Menace, I feel. Well, all of them. Yeah.
And I assumed for the sequels, Adam, you would say Pride.
Yeah.
Do I just want to be the Pride guy? I mean, I kind of do.
You're not just the Pride guy.
Yeah, whatever. I'm the Pride guy. But the thing is, like, I love the sequel trilogies, especially, studying them so hard for Shadow of the Sith. It's like, I kind of know them. I can recite them probably line by line. But again, there's for every Star Wars trilogy, like there's all the characters, the background characters that you see for 2 seconds.
Yeah, think of like Canto Bight. I mean, Canto Bight and Last Jedi would be
gold, man.
Yeah, it'd be everything in there.
Yeah.
And the characters that you don't see at all because they're hidden behind a panel, but now you know that they're there and they're watching.
They're there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. We'll keep all those pitches quiet for another time because I really threw you guys off with that one.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you both so much for joining us to chat about your new stories in Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view. And obviously, this is like one of your newest works coming out, and I can't thank you guys enough for joining us both today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have. Well, yeah, of course. I'm just like trying to do like the wrap up, and I'm like, who are we? So we are the HoloNet Marauders podcast. We've been having with Kristin, Baver, and Adam Christopher with us today. If you've been watching this on YouTube, we have it in an audio version as well. Just take it wherever audio platform for podcasts are available. If you've been listening on the audio platform, we have it on YouTube as well, and you can find us ever on social media at HoloNet Marauders. We'll see you next time on the HoloNet Marauders podcast.